We're live.
Alrighty, folks. Good evening, and welcome to the third edition of The Left, the Right, and the Absurd. Tonight, we will be further discussing the National Liberation Movement, as well as going and discussing the topics of dictatorships as well as foreign intervention. So we're going to go ahead and pick it up where we left off last week with the National Liberation Movement. Also, we have another member joining us, Individual Thought, also known as Connor. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself before we start, Connor?
Maybe a little bit. My current iFunny profile is introspection. I'm a political nihilist, moral nihilist, and existential nihilist, and I think that's all that's really relevant at the moment.
Alrighty, thank you very much. And I think we should get things underway with the discussion of the National Liberation Movement here. We left off last week. We talked a little bit about the Israel-Palestine conflict, as well as talking about
It's Tibet and China.
Yes, Tibet and China.
Zapatistas as well, I think.
Yeah, we touched on that just a little bit, I think, or maybe we were going to start
We just
with this
mentioned
week.
them.
Yeah.
Cole, are we going through and giving our little 30-second spiel?
We'll do that. So I'll say that for another time.
All right, that's fine.
Which one was that?
Just a little intro into
Issue of the week for us
individually.
individually. Not that we're going to be talking about it, but just like a little blurb that we thought was important.
All right. Either way, let's get on with national liberation.
Sure. Okay. That's
if
fine.
that's okay.
No, go for it. Yeah.
All right. Who wants to start?
What have you
So
guys
I
from
think-
last week?
Which one is the most relevant in today's society? I guess would be the question that I have.
Well, did anybody hear about how I believe Netanyahu said something about that he blamed Palestinians for the Holocaust?
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah,
That's something we could talk about.
Okay,
Well,
well,
I mean, it's
for
literally just
Netanyahu,
bullshit. But
he makes the most outrageous statements, but it gets him headlines and it gets him media time, right?
That's true.
So
like Donald
I don't think he actually
Yeah, I was gonna
believes
say,
it.
it's a Donald
She's like a Jewish Donald Trump, basically.
Yeah, he's trying.
Okay,
Population
guys, let's let people talk here.
for okay, yeah. So I think he's trying to galvanize the Jewish population in Israel and elsewhere to further promote Israel as a state, as a legitimate state. And I don't whether that's legitimate or not. I mean, is the question we're going to be answering. But I think it works. I mean, it clearly has galvanized a lot of Jewish people to support Israel.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's a common trait among politicians is utilizing
Disasters.
what's the old adage is there's no
It's-
such thing as bad press.
Yeah.
And I think Netanyahu is really utilizing that to the fullest potential that he can.
Absolutely. Don't let a good tragedy go to waste.
And I mean, we hear jokes about it all the time from the how we all know each other about the My Six Gorillion and stuff like that. But I think part of the major issue, though, is that most countries today fully recognize Israel as a state, while the number of countries that recognize Palestine as a state, even though it has existed predating Israel's existence, as a homogenous state. I think that creates one of the biggest issues is that we don't recognize these people as people. I mean, we constantly see all this propaganda about the Palestinian people.
well, I mean, that's the thing.
9/11 was a great example. We had people talking about how the Palestinians
Some
were
independent thought.
celebrating it, when in actuality the picture was falsified and it was from another foreign country, and it was.
But I don't think we picture them, or anyone pictures them as subhuman. I think everybody is treated as a human being. It's just that Israel, especially in the States, is favored just because of the propaganda and the media attention that it gets.
And there's a religious aspect to that, too, I think.
Absolutely.
The whole God's chosen people thing, a lot of neoconservatives seem to buy into that.
A lot
Like,
of
it's
them.
really old. I really don't like that argument. It's just like so fundamental, like
There's a- I think
fundamentally
there's a lot
flawed.
There's so many issues with that argument that just
But I
It would
think
take an entire episode to break down all the flaws in that argument.
I think
Yeah.
even with the God's chosen people argument is that particularly Hasidic Jews, they do think that they're God's chosen people, but they say as of now they don't have a right to establish Israel as a state.
Yeah, I know
That's
what you're talking about.
Well, if you're going to talk about God's chosen people, I mean, there's 3 or 4 groups that have a claim, right? The Christians, Jesus died in Jerusalem, so is it not the Christians' holy land? The Muslims,
Yeah.
they want it. So is
Yeah,
it
and the
not
Jews deny Christ as like the Messiah, so that's kind of another peg in the
right?
thing for Christians.
The Jews killed Jesus in Jerusalem,
Right.
so why would it be their holy? Right? There's so many flaws in this argument.
and historically speaking, the early Israelites were a nomadic people, and the biggest thing is that most of today's Jews that live in Israel
European immigrants.
they're European immigrants. They're what is it, Hellenistic Jews?
Yes.
As opposed to what, Ashkenazi?
Yeah, the Ashkenazi Jews, which were descendants of the Israelites. And the Israelites were, to begin with, nomadic people. They never had a true home to begin with. And on top of that, the fact that a lot of people who actually know biblical text and have studied the history of it know that time that the Israelites were wandering the desert for 40 years, they weren't lost. They were going around attempting to build an army to overthrow it and take land.
Right.
And their whole premise of it was to wander the desert, find the nomadic tribes, and say, join us or we'll destroy you.
Do you guys mind if I play devil's advocate here for a sec?
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
please.
I think one of the main arguments that a lot of Palestinian supporters make is that the Israelites, or the Jews, stole their land. Right? I
They
think that's
came
also
in
a
the
flawed
30s or
argument.
whatever and fucked their
I
shit up.
think it's also a flawed argument because, yes, the UN gave them land, and maybe that wasn't so great, but the land that Israel took during war, right, which is the same way land is traded hands for the entirety of human history, right? So to say that they stole land is kind of a fallacious argument as well. But that's just me playing devil's advocate.
But at the same time, while the UN gave them land and they took it through war, and I have no issue with the Israeli people living, or coexisting, I should say, with the Palestinian people. As of right now, I don't see that as a possibility, especially with their current leader.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
B, during, what was it, the 6-Day War, when they took land from
Jordan, Egypt.
different parts of the Middle East,
Yeah.
the UN also placed an order for the Israeli people to return that land. And
So would we.
the way I see it is this should be no different. They're occupying Palestinian territory, and to claim it as their own for illegal settlements is no different than claiming the land of, what was it, Egypt and Iraq?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, then again, devil's advocate here, of course. Then the response to that would be that Palestine was never a state, and you can't steal land from something that never existed.
And that I think that's one of the biggest points that we're trying to raise here is that a lot of the countries nowadays don't see it as a valid state. While there are some that accept Palestine as a state, it's slim in numbers.
All right, you want to switch gears? Maybe could we talk about Hamas, perhaps? If that's good with you guys.
That's one of the things that I think holds back the Palestinian liberation movement the most. Because if they went about it through peaceful means, I think they'd be much more successful than trying to get it by violence. Because they're never going to overtake Israel via a military strike. Or any type
not
of,
as long as the U.S. is providing them support.
You guys, I don't know. I did an essay on this. Did you guys ever hear about the Samson option?
No.
No.
I feel like I've heard of it.
It's supposed to be an agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, right?
What, the Samson option?
Yeah.
No. So this is the military option that Israel would take should it ever be overrun militarily. And basically what they'll do is they have nuclear submarines, right? So they'll level every capital city in Europe with the nukes that they have. That's the same. I don't know if you guys know the story of Samson in the Bible. He pushed down the temple on top of himself, killing thousands of Philistines within the temple. It's pretty much after that. So if Israel's ever overrun, they'll just send off all the nukes and say, "Fuck you! You guys didn't come to our aid."
Well, that's actually a good topic to bring up. That's another thing that I think is extremely important. I think it was probably about a year ago when Iraq was building nuclear facilities for the purposes of nuclear power, and
Iran.
yes, Iran. Sorry, and Netanyahu was raising a terrible stink about it, about the fact that they weren't allowing UN officials to inspect it when Israel's been doing the same thing for years. Their nuclear facilities have gone uninspected, and we don't know what they have if they're using it for nuclear power, which is unlikely at this point in time.
Very unlikely.
They're using it militarily.
I just find it like kind of funny that they've been saying that Iran's going to get a bomb for like all these years and they still haven't. And I mean, then they're like, well, if Iran gets a bomb, they're just going to use it.
The
I mean,
US
that's
media
like
has
the
literally been
stupidest.
pushing that rhetoric to justify intervention for the last 40 years.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's no fucking way Iran would like use a nuke. Like, that's just they would get absolutely annihilated by Israel if they had. Just, like, there's
They
no.
get annihilated by the U.S. if they used a nuke.
Right,
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's the principle of mutually assured destruction. Like, you fire off one nuke, like, you are going to get absolutely fucked. Like, they're not going to do that. They're not
The
crazy.
thing is, every country that's allied or against every other country is going to react the same exact way. Oh, you blew up our allies, so now we're going to send this nuke to you.
Right.
I mean, does Iran have the right to have a nuke? Like, because I honestly think they do.
I think so, because no nuclear invade. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What? Why should any country not have the right? Right?
It's
As long
either
as-
no one should have them or everyone should, or not everyone, but you should have the rights to.
Why should
Right, I
every-
mean, no nuclear nation has ever been invaded before. Like, that's a pretty fucking good deterrent to war, so I'm, like, kind of for that.
Right. Well, and one of the, I think, the best arguments for well, not necessarily the Iran deal, but Iran getting a bomb, is that Israel has been the power in the region for such a long time that it's completely destabilized. Right? Israel's the sole power in the region, and they can do whatever the fuck they want. If Iran has a bomb, then there can be a little bit of compromise and negotiation between the two nations.
To get back on topic, though, we were discussing Hamas, and while I do agree with Patrick that it is extremely detrimental to the Palestinian movement, I also see it as the idea of a peaceful means of Palestine protesting has just not worked. They've been pushed back into the smaller borders that they have been, and the existence of Hamas didn't come around until much later than the occupation, because the transitioning from the 48 borders to the, 68 borders?
67.
67. Yeah. It's a huge difference, and between those 19 years there, Hamas never existed. And it took years after that still for Hamas to rise up. So, I mean, things like these, occupation, we see terroristic groups form in these places that have been occupied.
Yeah, like
And
imperialism creates
Israel and
terrorism.
Palestine, it's most of the Middle East through primarily U.S. intervention, which I think is going to be something that we talk about a lot later.
Yeah.
It's going to be a topic of discussion we'll have later. Exactly.
So I think Hamas's existence has almost become necessitized by the Israeli occupation because it's their one means of fighting back. While it might not be their best option, it's their only true means of defense. as I see it.
I completely
It
agree
is
with
the
that.
same
I
way
think
it
if
is-
you have a situation where you have an imperial power trying to occupy your land, I think forming a violent force to resist them and push them back is like one of the best things you can do.
All right, wait,
Because
real quick.
tr-
Remember, I just want to remember you guys saying all this for. I'll use it later probably.
all right,
One of the other things I wanted to bring up is the fact that from all fronts, Palestine is blocked off.
I just want to bring up, if we're going to talk about Hamas, have you guys heard about like Israel faking the Hamas manifesto or whatever it was?
The
I have
manual,
not
I
heard
believe.
about this.
Yeah.
It was a while ago, actually. I think.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
really?
that they completely like screwed with it and changed things with it into this completely false.
well, they're just like a propaganda machine. That doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Israel is a major propaganda machine, and most of what they pop out has been either
It's directed
it's either
to increase the support for the imperialistic cause that the
Yeah,
powers that
it's
be
either-
inside the Israeli government are interested in.
it's either a questionable topic, or it's already Israel has either done, like, it's either questionable or Israel itself has backtracked and admitted to falsifying it. Like the thing that they say started the end of the ceasefire it was like a few years back. The when the two Israeli kids
It's
were
like
killed,
two
the
summers ago.
Palestinian, yeah.
Mm.
They blamed the Palestinians for killing the two teens, and then that was when the Israeli naval ship
yeah.
launched the rockets onto the beach, killing, what was it, 3 Palestinian children?
I think it was 4 kids on the beach.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that the Israeli Navy blocks off the sea. I mean, I'm not a supporter of Jon Stewart's political beliefs at all, but he raised an extremely valid point talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict when people brought up the point of why don't they just leave? Because Israel has them blocked off on the land, they have them blocked off from the sea, and then Egypt's border is closed off to them.
Right.
Yeah,
There's-
kind of trapped. So
Transition to Tibet. What time are we at?
We were almost 20 minutes in, I believe.
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
but I think that like, the thing, the entire blocked off also can also go into Tibet. But
It's the same thing. Well, it's not quite the same thing because Tibet does have access into India.
yeah,
Ish.
Well, wasn't that how the Dalai Lama was able to
Escape.
leave
Yes.
Tibet? Because
Yeah.
he was exiled from it, and if he were to ever return, he would be immediately detained.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's one of the greatest. I've read a little bit of the Dalai Lama, and I think that right there is one of the strongest points for the Tibetan conflict. He is completely exiled from his home.
Yeah, and it's his home, and I think that's the most important thing. Is that people should be able to go, especially back to their home, of all places.
so,
And I
freedom
think-
of travel.
I think any person that supports freedom or the idea of even for people like libertarians that live in the United States that believe in the Constitution, supporting the ability to like free travel is an extremely important thing in my eyes.
Yeah, freedom of
Because
association definitely is one of the
I-
paramount tenets of libertarianism.
Yeah,
A lot of
and
different. Most anarchism, I believe, as well.
Well, yeah, anarchism definitely is about like all things voluntary, so that's definitely on there too.
Do you want to
anyway,
transition to
continue.
a different topic as a whole, or we're going to keep going?
One more thing
I
on
think
Tibet.
that's. I
did we
think
want to, since we didn't cover it last week and we've discussed a lot of what we've covered last week, did we want to discuss the Zapatistas really quickly? Because I think that is an extremely strong movement.
Well,
Yeah, I do
would
too.
say
I'm
going
totally in
along with
favor.
Zapatistas. I want to talk. I just want to bring it up. The indigenous movements in America and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the camp or where it was. The ones in Canada where the Oka crisis, I think it was called.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. All right, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the Mohawks, right?
I'm not sure. I can't give it, but
Well,
I
that's not
know with the Indigenous people of Canada that the Canadian government is like practically trampling through their lands to build pipelines and take other stuff like that, and they're trying to fight back peacefully, but by blockading roads and things like that. But there's also armed movements, and I think that goes into the Zapatistas.
Yeah, I think the Zapatistas are one of the greatest examples of an armed movement, and I think, honestly, of all the movements, the Zapatistas are probably one of the furthest moving and most successful so far. While they haven't achieved their goals, they've made the most headway in getting
I mean, yeah, they have an autonomous community now, and like they still get attacked by the Mexican government, I believe, but it's better than they were before.
Is it like a Taiwan-China situation?
They were in the Chiapas, Mexico.
Yeah,
region,
they're in
yeah.
the southernmost state of Mexico.
No.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it,
like right on
is
the
it like,
border.
is it like the relationship between Taiwan and China?
I'm gonna just say no because of the fact that they're two states, and the revolutionaries in the Chiapas
the EZLN. What they're doing is they're fighting the corruption
they're
in
very much
Mexico.
libertarian oriented in
Yeah,
political nature.
the thing about Mexico that most people don't realize is it isn't a poor country. It's an extremely corrupt one.
Right.
They constantly have money. The issue is the politicians constantly hoard it for themselves.
Sounds like Africa.
So what yeah, it's exactly like that. The Zapatistas, what they're fighting for is they're fighting against the corruption of the Mexican government and attempting to take power back for the people through a leftist movement.
I mean,
And I think the cool thing when it comes to the Zapatistas is that they've never really set out a specific ideology. They've just been classified as libertarian socialists, even though they never specifically said that they were anarchist or Marxist or anything like that.
the thing is, and also, I believe their actual uprising started the day NAFTA was passed, or at least around that, and that was a
Yeah.
huge part of why they rose up. Because they knew NAFTA was going to screw them over, like, more than anything else they've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Right. Are we gonna move on to topic 2 here?
If everyone's good, yeah. We're
Yeah,
at
that's
22
fine with
minutes.
This is a topic I really want to talk about, and there's one thing in particular that I really do want to talk about, and I think it's good to discuss a current dictator, and I think of all the ones that we could discuss, Bashir al-Assad would be an extreme.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
All of us see quite constantly a lot of people supporting Assad.
Yeah, I
Due to
do
the
see a
fact
lot
that
of Assad's.
he's one of the few non-puppet dictatorships in the Middle East that opposes the U.S.'s intervention into Middle Eastern affairs. But what most of these people don't realize is
He's
the
not actually a good person.
Yeah, he's a shitbag, definitely.
If you've ever actually talked to anyone that has Syrian descent or is from Syria, they will completely just despise him. He's an extremely brutal dictator that does terrible things to his people, and he needs to be ousted.
And
that's-
I've
go
seen
ahead.
people support Assad. Like I'm talking mostly about some Marxists, and I'm talking about like Maoists and Marxist.
Can we just
Leninists.
not consider them real people?
But
I'm all for that.
Yes.
but the reason that they say that they support Assad and the Free Syrian Army and things like that is because they take an anti-imperialist standpoint, and that he's a secularist or something.
Well, being a
Murdering your own people doesn't mean that
necessitate
it doesn't just give you a fucking free
adherence
pass
to-
because you're a secularist. That's just
Yeah, and
stupid.
I think a lot of the things that they say that they support these sick authoritarian governments is for an anti-imperialist stance.
Yeah, like they'll say imperialism is the quote primary contradiction, because they're Marxists.
Yeah.
So they obviously have to side with the anti-imperialists. That's why a lot of them, I think,
What
support
the
North Korea
fuck?
too.
Why are they dichotomizing that? That's retarded. If you're a Marxist, support fucking Marxist movements and Marxist philosophies that are being applied in today's political world. Don't go supporting dictators
that'd be like
just
me
because they're
supporting
fucking
European nationalism. That
anti-imperialist.
doesn't make any fucking sense.
But I've also seen I've seen some of them support North Korea like for an anti-imperialist reasons, not because they actually support.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree, though, that we're all anti-colonial and anti-imperial, but we don't advocate for governments going around and killing their own people.
I mean, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why would you advocate something that you don't believe in? Like, that's just.
I don't think that they're quite advocating
Exactly.
it. I think they're they're defending
volitionally offering their argumentative support.
Yeah, we support them, but not what they do. We only support them for an anti-imperial stance. It's kind
of. I mean, some of them will go as far as to support like ISIS. Like, I'm serious.
I've never seen that, and
I can't remember the name of the group, but
I have to say, I think that to support a group like that, or like Assad, is to be, even if it's for anti-imperialist reasons, yet not supporting everything else. I just think it's disingenuous because you're still showing support for something. It's like the old adage of support the troops, not the war. You're still supporting the same thing.
Right, and you're just trying to like fucking rationalize it, make yourself feel better about it.
Yeah.
Different cogs in the machine. Like, you can't have somebody going to Antifa rallies and shit saying they support Assad. That's completely
Yeah, you get the shit kicked out of you. They'd be like, "Are you fucking serious? Get out of here!"
I mean, Bashar al-Assad is a Ba'athist, right? Or however you pronounce that?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that.
All right, whatever.
Can I transition real quick because I want to talk about Africa, just because it's something that I think is very interesting. And that a lot of people are, I say this as an ANCAP, but a lot of people say, oh, well, capitalism is causing the poor, and the poverty that occurs there. And I just want to, Eric, you might want to jump in here too, because I know you're an ANCAP. That's something that I think a lot of people blame that isn't at fault.
I'm not even as an ANCAP will agree with that because
yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of the problem stems from like foreign aid, because whenever you're like giving foreign aid to those governments, you're just giving it to the politicians and not the people that actually need help. Because the politicians are.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It ties in perfectly with the situation in Mexico. The politicians take every bit of aid that those countries get and keep it for themselves.
Right.
It's
like Zimbabwe's had the same prime minister for 40 years.
Yeah, Zimbabwe had like massive inflation. They just like fucking their streets were just littered with their money. Like it was absolutely worthless. Like,
well, wasn't it similar to the inflation in Germany where people were getting paid hourly just so that they could buy lunch because the
that was World War II.
After World War I, I think.
Yeah, that was the Deutschmark. That was predating Hitler because Hitler was the one that fixed it.
Right.
Was it the League of Nations that decided that Germany needed to financially give reparations to injured countries?
Pretty much.
Afterwards, and they just printed the money and gave it over?
And there's, again, with inflation, like, I think it was in Tsarist Russia, where you had to pretty much have a wheelbarrow of cash just to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah, that was the the root, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think what we're all getting at here is that most dictatorships have causes like almost external to them. So like it tends to be conditions are absolutely atrocious for the people living there, and they look for a way out, and it tends to lead to dictatorships and totalitarian governments.
Well, I want to talk about another thing that's going to tie in. I think I'll save it until we get towards the end, because I think this will be a good one for me and Matt to discuss for both topics. And that's a lot of the U.S. intervention in establishing dictatorships.
Yeah.
I definitely have a lot to say about that with
Yes,
Iraq.
as
So
do
whenever
I.
we get there,
There's
Um,
gonna be a lot of talk on that, I believe. Yeah.
Cuba.
Uh,
Can I mention that? Because we
yeah, you were
mentioned
going to talk
Castro
about
last
Castro.
time.
That's right.
I don't mean to go off too long here, so I'll try to keep it short. But you guys were all saying, it sounded like you all agreed that sometimes a terroristic organization will spring from like imperialism. You were saying
Right.
how like Hamas isn't necessarily justified, but you understand why they exist due to Israel's actions.
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I think you could apply some of the same logic with the U.S. actions in Cuba, and as to why Castro exists and why he did the things that he did.
see,
And Matt, that's a very interesting point, but I'd have to counter by saying that the Soviet Union's influence had a lot to do with it as well. It wasn't
Oh, of
necessarily
course.
entirely the U.S.
Of
Right,
course,
so
yeah.
the Soviet Union arms Cuba, puts Castro in power, and then supports them economically for the entirety of the Soviet Union's existence from the beginning to the end of the Cold War.
Yes, yes.
but I also expect that many leftists, I'll say, support Castro's ideas. I still think his actions, his negative actions, predate the Soviet and U.S. intervention.
Yes.
I would go so far as to say because his actions stemmed from wanting to overthrow, what was it, Baptista?
Batista,
Yeah,
yes.
Batista.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that he was still predating the U.S. and Soviet interventions, still an extremely crazy man, I would say. He used people to carry out his deeds, similar to a way that that instead of actually acting upon them himself, he resorted to making other people do them. He was the figurehead leading them all into doing what he wanted. And I could honestly compare those actions to that of people like Hitler that had others do their dirty work.
I think that, yeah, I think his actions are deplorable. I mean, obviously, but I think it would be even if I was a leftist, I think it would be very, very difficult for me to support him given those deplorable actions.
Well,
I
wait,
think
what
that,
actions are we talking about here? What actions are we talking about here?
well, the dictatorial and brutal rule that he had for near on 40 years.
All right, but like, I mean, I could mention like there are still like democracy in Cuba in a way such as they have municipal councils and things that go obviously not completely bottom up, but there is still some democracy in Cuba. It's just on a municipal level.
Now, but not during the Cold War. Right? So Castro's firing squads would probably be one of the more awful things that I would say, but
I mean, could I
And
say like they deserved it?
that's
no,
Some
I'm
of
saying
them?
it's deplorable that it happened.
Okay.
and that's one of the things that I see with a lot of leftists is the support of Shea and their attempts to rationalize his actions. They use the same sort of arguments that a neocon uses with the troops. He was just following orders. They were political dissidents. They were this and that.
So somehow it's justified that they were killed, which is absolutely false.
Yeah, and that's the thing is while he was following Castro's orders and things like that, it doesn't make it justified. And that right there is one of the primary reasons that I do not support Marxism.
To be fair, it was again it was a revolution, and they were trying to get rid
Yeah.
of a lot of things.
That's what I'm trying to say, yeah.
But I would say and I mean this, but if Cuba was actually did a lot, I think Cuba could have done a lot of things better. But I think from a socialist stance, that the fact that they didn't actually hand the workers the actual means of production, they put it in the hands of the state. I think that's kind of things that turned them from trying to achieve socialism to put just still having a state power.
See, but in actuality, did Castro ever truly want socialism? We know Che did, but
I don't. This is anecdotal evidence, but my French teacher in last year, he was a Marxist, and he was always talking about Castro and Che, and he has Castro's autobiography or biography.
Yeah, I have that too.
And he seems to be a fan, and I think, to be honest, Castro was a socialist. But,
I would say so.
But I don't think he was a socialist, but I don't think he was a good socialist.
A state socialist, you could say.
Yeah.
The one thing I see is, like I was trying to say with the whole thing about Marxism, is this is my issue with ideas like Marxism. You attempt to achieve your idea through the revolution, but anyone that opposes you
must die.
But is that
your enemy.
Is that specific to Marxism? Because I don't think it is.
I don't think it's specific to Marxism. I would say that's more specific to Marxism, Leninism, and things like that to fight off the reactionaries to the revolution. But I don't think it's inherent to Marxism. I just think it's when it comes to revolution and things like that they feel like they need to fight it off. But I'm not saying that's justifying it. I think that's where it stems from. That they have to protect it, even though it kind of always slaps them in the face when it comes down to it.
All right. Well, then can I make 2 points here because I want to address that because I think that the killing of your political enemies is a very Marxist thing because that would never happen if ANCAPs revolted or if AWA revolted. I think that they would try to educate people rather than just kill them. I don't want to turn this into an ideological argument. But then I also want to say that I think that the crowning achievement of any leftist is probably Che because he was able to institute a pseudo-socialist government and it resulted in the deaths of millions of people versus the crowning achievement of capitalism, which has been America, which inadvertently in other countries has, but in our own country has been very prosperous and successful.
Well, can I counter with, if we're going to talk about the negative aspects of Che and Castro, then I'm going to say right now that their positive things are completely overshadowed by a lot of, I would say, propaganda against them. For example, if you have Cuba, pretty much where almost 1/3 of the countryside, actually pretty much the entire countryside, can't read or write. They don't know their history. They don't have health care. Some of them don't know where their next meal is going to come the next day. The first thing Castro does in power is institute universal education, universal health care. Now Cuba has one of the better health care systems in the entire world. Their people are educated. They have a 99% literacy rate. They've just cured mother-to-child HIV transmissions. I mean, the good they've done, despite a 50-year-long embargo, is absolutely amazing to me.
But Matt, what about the fact, would you say the same about someone like Hitler? He
reduced the unemployment rate down to like the 100,000s.
Yeah, like understandably so.
Hitler completely turned Germany around from the fact that they were in the same boat as Russia, where their money was completely worthless. They had to get paid hourly so that they could buy food, and he took that and turned it around. The same thing can be said about Stalin, who industrialized Russia in what was seen as a record time, but
yeah, the same with Mao and the great jump forward for China.
Yeah, great leap forward. Like they all apply, and then you have to wonder, like, how many of them were, what's the word I'm looking for? Compassionate about it. How many of them actually cared about their people? Like,
I don't think very many of them.
Okay.
Well, wasn't Mao's whole thing being about the people? I think honestly, if we were to look at it, I can definitely agree Hitler had no regard for his people. Everything was about him. And
Cole, I think that that's been the politicians' argument since the dawn of time.
Yeah, I definitely.
People for the people for the people, whether it is or not is you know, who knows?
I think if we're going to talk about Mao and Maoism, I think it would be more important to actually have a Maoist in here to defend it. So
Yeah.
I think we should wait till we have Boone in here or whatever.
because I know from in Maoist ideology that it's very centered around people and the people as a whole, and not just the state.
See,
It going along the lines of people's war, and I don't know much about Maoism, but I just feel like if we're going to talk about Mao and Maoism as a whole, I think we better just have a Maoist in here.
Like mass line theory, all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's a reason that there aren't very many Maoists.
the one thing I do want to say is that the issue I see with that is the difference between written word or philosophical thinking and actual execution.
Yeah, and I mean there are Maoist groups out there that follow Maoist theory and things like that, but I'm just saying I just feel like if we're gonna talk about when it comes to, because I feel like Mao did care about his people to a certain extent, but I don't think it was on the same level as Hitler, and where he just completely disregarded who wanted to achieve.
I mean, I'd say the difference between, obviously Mao and Hitler, or Stalin and Hitler, Castro and Hitler, is an ideological one. Obviously fascism and, their branch of Marxism, whether it be Marxism-Leninism or Mao Zedong thought.
Yeah. But
I think, what's the time we're at now?
41 minutes.
I think now would probably be a good time to get started in the transition, and I think we should really start it with we'll end it with discussing some dictatorships created through foreign intervention.
Real quick, actually, just to end this one, is that another thing is that you have to understand is the context between what Castro was dealing with, where, in fact, he saw the overthrow of in Guatemala of Jorge Ubico in 1954. He saw that, and he knew that if I dare to come to power via democratic means, this same thing will happen to me. In fact, he warned Salvador Allende of Chile that if he were to come to power via democratic means, he would surely be overthrown, and that happened in 1973.
I think we'll go on
to foreign intervention.
I'll list a few of the ones that I know that were overthrown. As I know it was Salvador Allende, Kwame Nkrumah, Juan Batista Aristide, Mohammad Mossadegh,
Jorge Ubico. That was the one I just mentioned.
Jorge Ubico. There was one more that I know of for a fact in South America.
I'm trying to think with you.
Huh?
I'm trying to think with you.
I
mean, you could pretty much say every South American country, honestly.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Patrick?
And there's also
talk about Hillary.
I think Hawaii is actually another good one.
We could talk about Hillary at the end if we have time, I think.
Okay, yeah, because that was something that was really big in the news this week that I wanted to touch on, but we'll see about that.
I think Hawaii is actually another good one, but that's our annexation of it, I would say.
Yeah.
We can say that one towards the end. But I think Salvador Allende would be a good one to start with, as there's a lot of information out there about Allende, and there's actually declassified CIA documents about the overthrowing of Salvador Allende.
What was the name of the operation that they carried out?
PB Success, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm just something came into my head. I don't know. I'm
think
thinking Operation Boot or something. I could be wrong.
I think it was PB Success, because they always gave it names, strange names like that. I think the two biggest ones we should really cover that would fit into dictatorships and
No, PB
And
success was Guatemala. Sorry.
would be Salvador Allende and Mohammad Mossadegh.
Okay.
I think those are two of the biggest ones that we should really cover.
What time are we at right now?
To give
Probably
a
like
little
45
bit of
minutes.
Okay, Operation Boot was the Iran.
Okay. To give a little information on the whole deal with Salvador Allende, Allende was a leftist-leaning leader in Chile, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chile.
Wasn't he a democratic socialist? Or
I believe he actually identified as a Marxist.
Yeah,
The
I'm
first
almost
ever Marxist
something like
elected in
that.
Chile.
And there was an attempt by the CIA in order to overthrow him. They led a rebel group to overthrow him in his what was it, his house, and he was meant to give a speech that day to the people of Chile, and when at the time he was meant to give this speech, the rebel groups started attacking his house. He had pretty much everyone else leave, to my knowledge, and he stayed behind, and then gave a speech before he was killed.
Yeah, he killed himself.
When he was first killed, autopsy and said it was a self-inflicted wound from the AK-47 gifted to him by Castro. Years later, while the new government was in power in Chile,
under Pinochet.
Under Pinochet, the records all caught on fire. They found records in there of the CIA documenting the intent of the CIA to aid the rebel groups in overthrowing Salvador Allende. They returned to the autopsy to find 2 bullet wounds in his body. The first one they thought was from a smaller caliber pistol, and then the second one was from his rifle, and they ruled that he was killed first by the handgun, and then they inflicted the wound on him with the AK-47 in an attempt to make it seem like a suicide.
I did not know that. That was very interesting.
That's interesting. Also, can I talk about how fascinating it is that Pinochet came to power, and then the Chicago Boys came down, and Chile is now like the economic superpower of South America. I think that's fascinating. Because
Yeah,
the
definitely.
entire region has been plagued by dictatorships and war in between countries and civil war, and that one was able to emerge as the leader. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but
Milton Friedman still denies ever going down there, though.
Who?
Friedman?
But he sent people from University of Chicago down there, though.
yeah, and
He still to this day denies any ties to Pinochet's regime, though.
He's dead.
To his last day, he denied it. I'll rephrase.
So, are we going to continue this dictator conversation?
Yeah, let's go to Mossadegh.
with the Iranian coup d'etat, the whatever the fuck it's called.
The coup d'etat
Operation.
of
Yeah,
Mohammad Mossadegh.
yeah. They replaced him with the Shah, I believe.
Yeah, the
Yes.
Shah of Iran.
And
Yeah.
do you guys know why it was that he was overthrown?
I know.
Nationalization of oil fields, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the same exact reason that Saddam Hussein was killed, as well as,
Many other leaders in the region.
to my knowledge, Muammar Gaddafi as well.
Right.
I don't know much about Gaddafi, so.
Fun fact, Gaddafi was actually said to be one of the most cooperative people him to do. He pretty much did, and he had an obsession with Condoleezza Rice.
Huh.
But Saddam, Mossadegh, and Gaddafi all intended to nationalize oil, which conflicted with our
Economic interests, I used to
Or being the United States, let's clarify just to make sure.
yeah.
yes, that being the petrodollar primarily.
Right.
Do you want to
was
talk about that more in depth, just to clarify for somebody in the audience doesn't understand what that is?
Yeah, I think we should.
Thatch, do you
I
want to
don't
do it?
know.
What's that?
Do you want to do it? You seem like
Yeah,
you
I'll
know a
do
lot
it.
about it. Or Cole, it doesn't matter.
I think
I don't know a whole lot.
I think the
I
best way
know
is that our economy is propped up by the a term called the petrodollar. That all oil sales, pretty much in the world, are done using the United States dollar. And in the case of this, in the case of Saddam Hussein, they started trying to sell it with a different currency. Saddam Hussein was the euro. I'm not sure what Mohammed Mossadegh's was. But the problem being that a lot of people argue that if the oil sales no longer occur with U.S. dollars, the United States economy will topple. It'll crash, and it'll be a huge economic downturn for us.
well, because similar to explain, it was Nixon who disbanded the gold standard, was it not?
Yeah, it was.
And what the money, as we all know, needs some form of backing. For us, originally it was the gold standard until Nixon disbanded that, and then we began backing it with the petrodollar, forcing our currency to have some use in foreign nations.
Of course, the United States government doesn't acknowledge. They say, "Oh, well, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States."
Which is just nothing. It's more than it's just a promise, which is nothing because they've continually broken that promise multiple times.
And the thing is, the more we print, as we continue to print money more and more, the more worthless our currency gets because it's fiat. It's not backed by anything.
The current value of the dollar, I think, is 13 cents.
Really?
That doesn't surprise me. Nope.
Yeah.
Versus what it was when Nixon sought the gold standard, or when we
No,
started.
this is as of a few years ago.
Wow.
To put something into perspective, this was a similar situation that happened in Rome. There was a Roman emperor back in the day who began taking their coins, and instead of utilizing full precious metals to make the coins, he started mixing them with worthless metals like lead and shit like that. So they slowly began taking little bits of silver and gold out of their coins until eventually their coins were made strictly of useless metals that were worth absolutely nothing because they were abundant. And that was when their economy collapsed due to the fact that they no longer had anything worth anything backing their money. Or in that time, it was what the money was actually physically made of.
Yeah.
So the U.S. currently is on a hot track for that. That's why the U.S. government freaks out anytime anyone intends to back off of the petrodollar. That's
right, and that's closely intertwined with the military-industrial complex too, because it's what they use to enforce the petrodollar. Anytime anybody threatens to go off using the dollar for oil sales, there's usually an invasion that tends to follow that. That's what happened to Saddam Hussein.
Explain the military-industrial complex really quick, because I don't think a lot of people understand that one either. I mean,
it's various monopolies in self-defense contracting, any kind of weapons production. These big corporations that lobby any government officials to ensure that they have contracts with the U.S. military and associated.
So
what's the name of that private military company? That's
Blackwater.
Yeah, Blackwater.
Halliburton's an oil company.
Yeah.
It's Blackwater.
Blackwater, yeah. And I don't know. I just like
private military contractors are primarily what we fight our wars with nowadays. The
big companies like Boeing.
Yeah, Boeing has massive amounts of defense contract dollars flowing in.
Yeah.
Pretty much any arms company.
And you touched on lobbying, but they also lobbied to keep troops in places, right? One of Obama's campaign promises was that he was going to pull everybody out of Afghanistan, pull everybody out of Iraq. And now, of course, he turns around and says, yeah, we're actually going to keep them there until 2017 for stability and security.
Well,
And, yeah,
that's the thing. We still have military bases in every single country that we have ever had a war with.
And how many bases do we have? I think
It's like 736, I think.
Yeah, we have a.
I see various numbers about that. Like I've seen like
All I
900.
I wouldn't like that wouldn't surprise me at all. There's
All I
like
know
a
is
lot.
that we just have a shitload of bases in like everywhere, and a lot of these countries have barely reaching bases like over the double digits.
I think we also.
I have the official number here. So according to the report, the United States has 662 overseas bases in 38 foreign countries.
I think we also need to go in and. I mean, we obviously can't figure out the numbers, but can we really accept that they are being honest with us about?
So according to the Pentagon, we have 662 overseas bases in 38 countries. Ron Paul once said that we have 900 in 130 nations.
But I think the thing with this is that it's leaving out, like, I don't know, I know this sounds kind of conspiracy theory, but they're leaving out maybe secret bases and stuff like that, and private bases where they...
I don't think it's just that. I feel like it's also what Ron Paul's numbers would be discussing would be bases in allied countries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have no reason...
because it's an expense to maintain. When he mentioned that, it was referring directly to we're going broke as a result of superfluous military spending.
I think we have no reason, or we don't have any reason to, or we do have many reasons to believe that we have bases also in allied countries in case anything ever were to happen.
Just a little note here, we're at 56 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, we're getting there.
I believe it was an ex-CIA director that said if the United States people knew all the things that their government does, there would be a revolution tomorrow. Or something something on behind the scenes that we don't know about.
Yeah. That's part of the thing. Our government does a lot of, for lack of a better term, back alley deals.
Lots of shady stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, we constantly have people, like, we have new whistleblowers coming out, but we have people like Edward Snowden who...
And,
I think Edward Snowden's a great example because we have actually completely demonized that man.
And he does not deserve it at all. Not one bit. That man's a fucking hero.
what about Chelsea Manning?
Yeah,
good on him too, man. Or her. Wow, whatever.
I think it's her. I think it was Brad. I think
it was like, yeah, it was Bradley Manning. They wanted to be called Chelsea. So
I want to raise a point about Snowden, though. He left a cushy job as an analyst for the NSA in Hawaii with his smoking hot wife to inform the American people of what was happening, and he can now never return because of that.
And then people call him a fucking traitor. Like, I can't believe that. That just still blows my mind.
I think
that shows the amount of brainwashing that goes on. That shows just how fucked we are because the government is able to convince people that the actions that they take, whether it's on spying on us or police, expanding police and militarizing police, that these are all for our safety and security are completely necessary. And then when somebody calls him on it, he's forced to leave the country and he can never return.
Well, what was it? The old George Orwell quote about fascism? Fascism won't come with boots and guns, or
no, was that George Orwell? It'll come in I know the quote that you're talking about. But I'm not sure if it's George Orwell. But it'll come with a flag and a cross. I think it was.
Yeah. to basically put it into perspective to our current situation is it's not going to be a foreign invasion. It's going to be under the guise of self-defense or of protection of self.
Yeah, because that's how you expand government powers to capitalize on the fears of the public. You're like, oh, these people over there are scary and brown. They're going to kill you, so let us spy on you and do all these unconstitutional things for your safety. Like, people just eat that shit up. Yeah, or like it's for the children or something.
3 or 4 years ago that Colbert had the rally to keep fear alive.
I didn't hear about that, but that's funny.
I understand that Colbert is a satirist, but the whole premise of it was from his neocon standpoint of this is how the government takes power is through your fear of foreign invasion. I
can't believe that people have a fucking fear of foreign invasion living in the United States. Like, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. Like,
let me ask you this. What's the last account we can say that was truly an act of foreign invasion?
I'd say the War of 1812, I think, was like the last time.
And if the
maybe
reports
before that,
are
I don't
correct,
know.
isn't it like I think don't know, but I think per 100 people, I think it's like 85 have guns or something.
Oh yeah,
like
it's
that.
something absolutely nuts. Like, there's over 300 million guns in private hands in the United States. Like, it'd be absolutely ridiculous to invade the United States.
And I would say that if there is going to be people siding with the foreign invaders, I would say it'd be a very, very small minority out of how many people who live in the United States.
Like 325 million. Yeah.
But we have hit an
nuts.
hour in. Just letting you guys know.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we're going to go over.
I want to raise a point here, though, because I think it was something Cole said, is that politicians are able to play off of the fear of their constituents. So whether it's gun control, war, poverty, pick an issue. For the politician that's going to win the election is the one that's able to better scare the people that are voting, right?
Well, that's exactly what Hitler did.
Yeah, gun control. It's for the children. We're gonna have dead children. War. Oh, they're gonna invade us. Poverty. Oh, if we don't have these government programs, everyone's gonna starve. Right? Whether or not it's true doesn't matter, but it gets them elected, which I think is very, very dangerous.
I think while we have the chance, we should discuss Hillary.
That transitions well.
I was just gonna say, we are allowed to run over go over an hour.
Yeah, we're allowed. It's fine.
I think we just don't want to keep it too long, and I think now would be a good point to start discussing that. That way we don't
ramble on about.
Because I know keeping things too long does keep people from wanting to watch.
We'll just but I'm 5 minutes on Hillary and then call it a day.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So we have the email thing breaking now, and she is absolutely just completely contemptful when it comes to it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
I didn't really hear much about it, but I did see it on the news. I never got full context of what happened, so if you want to talk about
she's
that.
laughing. She's laughing about it when they're asking her questions, and she's just
let's talk about that.
absolutely. And this is an event which I know it's perpetuated by the military-industrial complex, but it's nevertheless an event that could have been prevented had she done her job. She didn't do her job. She's still running for president. No criminal charges have been brought against her. Which, if it had been anybody else, but no, it's the left's love child, or it's their poster child. So nothing's going to happen, and I think it really shows the oligarchical society that we live in because her last name is Clinton.
Well, people don't care either. That's the thing. Like, people, it was going back to like what we said in the first or second episode. People are just apathetic, and they don't really have a reason to give a shit. They're like, oh, well, I mean, didn't affect me, so I'm not gonna care. Like, whatever. I'm just still gonna vote for it.
And while we're on the go ahead, Enrico. Go ahead. Okay. Well, yeah, but I think that especially with this, is that people look at it, and instead of looking at a record, which she was kicked off of the Nixon investigation because she was, I think she falsified documents or something. So she did something immoral, and since then it's been nothing but lying for her entire political career. And yet, some people still say, "Oh yeah, she'd be a great president." I think those people are out of their minds.
I think anybody that thinks anybody's going to be a great president's out of their fucking mind.
I was just about to say,
she's
does
the
that make her
classic
any
wolf in
different
sheep's
from any other
clothing.
president?
I think the
I think
only
there still are moral politicians. They are very few and far between, but I believe that there are still a few.
I think the only difference between Hillary and most of the other politicians is that she actually got caught. She didn't get punished, she just got caught.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm sure that a lot of them do shit that you don't care about.
People aren't sorry until they get caught, and
She's not even sorry, and
yeah,
like,
that's the
people
thing.
don't seem to give a fuck. Like, that's
she's
the
not
thing.
sorry, and she's saying, why does it? Or I don't know exactly what she said, but why does it? Yeah, what difference does it make? Like, what difference does it make? It happened, and there's nothing we can do. But it could have been very well prevented from happening.
We're 1 minute and 5 minutes in.
Okay,
All right.
I think we should take away her Secret Service detail, and I think we should wait for her to make a call for security, and then just kind of see what happens. Just kind of leave her there. Because what difference does it make?
I agree.
If only.
And
Do we want to end here?
That works for me.
But do you think she's also running off of because Clintons have nothing but scandals since Bill was in office, and it started with Bill and Monica, and I read somewhere Bill did something with a mummy.
What?
Oh man.
I don't know if that's
I thought
true.
the thing with Monica Lewinsky was bad enough, but a fucking mummy?
No,
Holy shit.
I'm not saying it's true, but I read it somewhere that something
Hey man,
happened
he's just
with a
taking advantage of opportunities. When's the next time any of you are going to be able to fuck a mummy?
Anything is an upgrade from Hillary.
Okay, but I'm just
Gross.
saying, I read this somewhere, and I'm not saying it's true, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it was true.
Do we have any topics that we want to hit?
Alright, well, I think we can end on
think we
mummy
can just
fucking.
the one thing
Should be sufficient.
I really want to bring something up about since we raised the topic of apathy in the populace.
Right.
I really want to bring something up. We're all currently apathetic of what the politicians currently do, but my question to those that are watching or those that are going to watch later on, and hopefully they stay till this point, is what happens the next time that the draft gets issued and it finally does affect you? Or what happens when it's boots to the neck and they're stepping on everyone else's rights, and when everyone else is gone, you're the last one left? What happens when they come to your door?
As someone who's received his draft letter already, I am most certainly not willing to comply with any kind of draft orders.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't either. I would draft dodge or I'm not going to prison. Like, I'm doing whatever it takes to avoid prison and going in the military. So
Well, I feel like the entire apathy. I just want to say with the apathy thing. I would say when it comes to people who actually do care and want to talk about these things, they usually just get passed off as conspiracy theorists or just being edgy.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
There's a bunch of edgy conspiracy theorists.
I think that short of violent revolution, if the draft was ever instituted again, I think most people would draft dodge. No one is gonna, regardless of how many people say, "Oh, you're so patriotic for draft dodging," I don't think most people would do it. They just go to Canada.
I
don't know, man. Like, they're
Preemptively gone to Canada.
Were I to
Because I would have to say, along with the reason a lot of people draft dodged with Vietnam is because they thought the war wasn't justified. But if a draft wasn't,
when
we were going to Iraq.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up because, you have people fucking supporting the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, if you can get people to support those wars, I don't think there's a fucking war you can't get them to support anymore.
I think we should probably leave drafts for next week because we're getting on the long side here. And we
Yeah.
seem
Alright,
like
that
we're
sounds
really into
good.
this.
I think it was a good thing to raise this question at the end to prepare people that will watch all the way through for next week. And I think this is a topic we should discuss, but I think we should end it here.
Okay.
Alright.
Props to you.
Yeah, if you stayed this long, give us a like and subscribe and share it with your friends. That'd be awesome.
Anything you recommend in the comments, because we'd love the feedback. We're still trying to.
And thank you, everyone who did watch tonight or stayed all the way through. We definitely appreciate your viewership, and we're glad to have you. And hopefully you will tune in next week.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. We
Alright.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
See ya.